Two common terms used across all forms of competition are clutch and choke, the former being to succeed at a critical moment and the latter being to fail in that moment. Speedrunning is no different in this regard. The polarity of these terms means they typically aren't used together to describe the same thing. However, if you adjust the definitions a bit, I managed to do both in the same run. Live. During a charity marathon. MidSpring Speedfling 2022, a non-stop 3-day springtime marathon for Midwest Speedfest. This marathon was a hybrid event, where part of the scheduled speedruns took place online, and the rest happened on site at VGMCon Liftoff in Minnesota. As such, most of the online speedruns happened when the convention wasn't running, i.e. the late night and early morning hours. I wasn't able to attend in person due to a mix of work and the cost of traveling and staying at the event. But even with the online option, I'd been in a lull where I simply didn't have the desire to speedrun anything for months. The desire to help this marathon I'd been part of on and off for several years won out though, and I made one Hail Mary submission of a game I'd started running here and there after making a lengthy YouTube video about it. Shadow War of Succession, aka the worst fighting game I've ever played. Yes, I know I have questionable tastes in speedruns. There was no one more surprised than me when the marathon's schedule was revealed, and lo and behold, Shadow War of Succession made it in. Specifically, a run of Advanced Mode, the game's highest difficulty. I would run the game at roughly 5:40 in the morning on a Sunday. Running this game isn't particularly complicated, so practicing every now and then would be sufficient to make my estimate. Unless they accepted my idea for an incentive to play as the game's final boss, the Shadow King. Which they did. Playing as the Shadow King involves playing through the game up to the final fight, having a second player start versus mode, then winning the versus fight to play as the Shadow King with the second controller. This would be easy to do except for one thing. This is a 3DO game. The 3DO has a few things I don't like about it. One of which being that every model of the console only has one controller port. Any additional controllers need to be daisy-chained together with the ports on the controllers themselves. This run has a moment where a cutscene needs to be skipped, which can only be done by pressing a button on the first controller. So I'd have to keep it close by for the whole run, but not accidentally pull it to the floor by moving my controller too much, or hit one of the buttons on it at the wrong time and enter versus mode. As for the Shadow King himself, to my knowledge, his move list isn't posted anywhere. But I found out a few things about him, aside from how to do his projectile and a goofy-looking flying kick. 1. Shadow King can't teleport like almost every other character in the game. 2. Unlike every other character, he can't block. Whereas a run with anyone else requires some level of caution, Shadow King runs tend to involve being stupidly aggressive and mostly just hoping you don't get trapped in a corner and spammed to death. In addition, because the categories require showing the difficulty select screen, which can't be done when playing as the Shadow King, he wound up becoming his own absurd category. Anyway, I was scheduled not only for a run early Sunday morning, but also a couple of hosting shifts and helping with some back-end marathon stuff. I did the necessary prep leading up to the event, and a couple days before the marathon started, I got sick. I couldn't breathe through my nose, my throat was dry and irritated, causing me to cough constantly, and I had a headache that would get worse every time I coughed. A sane person would have backed out of these commitments and focused on getting healthy. or at the very least, found someone healthy to co-commentate the run. Since I couldn't find anyone to do that, I instead tried to speedrun getting healthy, and still doing everything I said I would. This included taking at least 4 different pills, smothering my chest in VapoRub, and eating more Hall's cough drops in 2 days than I had in the previous 20 years. Still, the first thing I had to do was host a couple early morning runs, and I could not hide that something was different about my voice.
So, let's see. If you have anything to plug, now would be an absolutely wonderful time to do so.
Alright, well, I do have a $2 donation from Non-Binary Code, who says, no comment. Except that one. This one doesn't count.
I was also still having coughing fits on a fairly regular basis, on top of being congested to hell and back. That said, even though the whole idea of hosting is to talk, it usually happens in short bursts, and since I was online, I could use push-to-talk to cover up coughing or blowing my nose, so I was able to get by this way for my entire shift. However, the time eventually came about 24 hours later when I had to perform my run and spend 18 minutes in front of a live mic. I'd had a couple largely sleepless nights and nearly consumed more drugs than food at this point, but I signed on a little over half an hour before my run to set up to play as the Shadow King, just in case the incentive was met. Which it was at the last possible moment. I was actually doing well, both on the run and commentating it without coughing or sniffling, until about 5.5 minutes into the run, when the floodgates opened.
And that's on top of spamming the projectile and a high kick that he likes to do. Excuse me. Excuse me, I need some water. No, I was hoping that would not happen during the run, but oh well. So, Riggs is another character who has a very slow running level.
Ever have one of those moments where your saliva accidentally goes down your windpipe? This was that, but my throat already being sore and dry caused the coughing fit to go on longer and not completely subside until almost 2 minutes passed. Yes, in the most literal sense, I choked during the run. However, thanks to some good RNG both in terms of how the AI behaved and which dialogue before each fight played, because some dialogue is shorter than others, I still wound up doing this.
Time. By the way, what was the time on that?
13 minutes, 8 seconds.
Oh, well, that's a record. Can't say I was expecting that.
Are we talking PB or are we talking actual world record?
Record. No, granted,
Saw it here.
this particular category hasn't existed for very long, but that's a significant leap over the time that I had before. I was going to cap this off by giving a shout-out/apology to anyone who was put on the backup list so that this could be in the marathon. But man, I'm completely blindsided by that.
In a matter of minutes, I'd gone from literally choking during a run to clutching it in the end and posting a new best time. You know, I've done a previous video about getting a new world record during a marathon run, and it seems like whenever it does manage to happen to me, either a PB or world record, there's always some kind of catch. like that embarrassing Dragon's Lair SNES run at GDQ, or this run where I get into a huge coughing fit and the commentary gets wrecked for a couple of minutes. I guess if there's anything to take away from this story, it's the old sports adage of playing through the pain. Once a marathon run starts, there's a chance things beyond your control will affect what you're doing. And the best thing you can do is just roll with it and make the best of it. Oh, and one more thing. Don't commentate a run if you're sick. Just don't.